I've just arrived in Hanoi, Vietnam, and this marks the beginning of my 3-week journey through Southeast Asia. In this video, I'm gonna give you my first impressions of Hanoi and Vietnam in general, and I'm also gonna dig into some pretty interesting history. Hanoi is the capital of Vietnam, and it's the second biggest city in the country, with more than 8 million people. It was founded in 257 BC, and it has a couple of pretty pretentious nicknames, such as the City of Roaring Dragon and the capital of 1,000 years of civilization. Let's see if it can live up to those names. Hanoi is a big and modern city, but most tourists flock to the Old Quarter. This area dates back to the 11th century, when Hanoi became the capital after Chinese occupation ended. It's a fascinating area for many reasons: the architecture, the shopping, the bustling crowds, and the cheap beer. The Beer Street is a pretty infamous part of the Old Quarter. I was expecting it to be touristy, but I wasn't really expecting quite such a spectacle. The Beer Street is where you can find cheap local draft beer called Bia Hoi. And when I say cheap, I mean cheap. This Saigon special is 30,000 dong, but a Bia Hoi, that's more like 10,000 dong, so quite cheap. However, Bia Hoi is brewed quickly and cheaply and has like 3% alcohol compared to Saigon, which has 5. So unless you want to go to the bathroom all the time and not get drunk, maybe you want to stick to bottled beer anyway. It's not very well hidden at all, is it? I can see it, it's right there. There are 36 themed streets in the Hanoi Old Quarter. There's a street of buckets, for example, and a street of silver, and a street of fish sauce. One of the themed streets is the Night Market Street, Hang Dao. The Night Market Street stretches out for 3 kilometers, and it's filled with just about everything you can imagine. I've heard about cobra wine and snake blood shots being sold at the night markets in Hanoi, but to be honest, I don't think that's happening here. It's mostly just cheap toys and knockoff products of all kinds. Today is actually Christmas Day, and I'm having a pretty pitiful excuse for a Christmas dinner. It's a chicken pho of some sort. Everything was just okay, but just okay is still pretty good for Vietnam. And there's something to be said for having dinner in the middle of Beer Street, full of drunken tourists and cheesy Christmas music in the background. People here must be chain smokers. During my dinner, I've had 3 peddlers trying to sell me cigarettes and 2 trying to sell me massages with happy endings. So, time for some first impressions of Hanoi. It's quite crowded, a lot of traffic, and it looks a bit old and dusty and run down, to be honest. But at the same time, it's extremely pleasant and inviting to walk around. For such a huge city, it's quite walkable and quite friendly as well. There's a lot of street peddlers and people trying to sell you something, but they're really not as pushy as in, for example, Thailand, and let's not talk about Egypt. A train running through a city is nothing unusual, but a train running 1 meter from cafes and houses is something quite spectacular. The train street is something you simply must see if you visit Hanoi. At least that's what they used to say. But as of September 2022, the city has become fed up with tourists endangering themselves and others, so access to the street has been restricted. You can still see the street and sit at certain cafes, but don't expect any more Instagram shots of people posing in the middle of the railway. They have these guards that prohibit you from walking into the train streets, unless you find a local who invites you to their cafe on the other side. So now I can enjoy some beer and spring rolls while I wait for the train that never comes. It's supposed to show up a couple of times per day, but no one seems to know exactly when. Oh well, it's still an interesting place. I stand corrected. Apparently there is a timetable, but the train isn't gonna be here until 9 PM, so yeah, I'm not gonna wait around. This is probably not the most scenic place to see the train street, but it's very convenient. The first time in a new country, I sometimes have a bit of a trouble understanding how the stores work, and that's happening to me here in Hanoi. I might be looking for some place to eat, and then all of a sudden it's a hardware store instead or something. I think it's the store layouts or the colors or something like that that really messes with me. You basically have to get used to the layout of the city and how it flows, I guess. Scooters are everywhere in Hanoi, but I pretty much expected that. There are not that many bicycles though. I thought there would be a few more. In general, the traffic really isn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. Something I didn't expect to find in Hanoi is a Harry Potter themed cafe. But then again, I'm not really sure why I didn't expect it, cause Harry Potter is everywhere. They have butterbeer, but that sounds absolutely horrible, so maybe a goblet of fire instead, or a forgetfulness potion. I'm leaning towards the forgetfulness potion. This place is called Always Cafe, and I'm not really sure why. Oh, thank you. Well then, cheers to forgetfulness. Oh, and by the way, cheers to forgetfulness. Oh, and cheers to forgetfulness. Okay, you got it. Dress up for free. Yes, I think I shall. Looking fashionable while sipping my drink. They're giving away necklaces for a review. I don't really want more stuff to carry, otherwise it would have been tempting. Have you ever read Harry Potter yourself?
Me?
Yeah.
I am manager is so.
Well, that was certainly interesting. The drink was perfectly fine, but to be honest, this is a place you go to for the experience and maybe not for the quality of the drinks. The Hoan Kiem Lake lies in the south part of Hanoi's Old Quarter, and the name means the Lake of the Restored Sword. This place is just lovely. It's like an oasis in the middle of the Old Quarter. Or, well, in the south of the Old Quarter. According to legend, Emperor Leloy was in trouble in the 15th century. He was battling the Chinese, but things weren't going well. Stories say that he received a sword called Heaven's Will, either from a golden turtle god, or from a dragon god, or from a fisherman who found it in his nets. There are many variations on this story. Either way, he used the sword to defeat the Chinese, and afterwards he was enjoying some boating on this lake when a golden turtle god came up and said, "Hey, I want my magic sword back." The emperor returned the sword to the turtle god, and after that he renamed this lake into Hoan Kiem in honor of these events. The Temple of the Jade Mountain, Temple, is one of the most famous sites to visit at the lake. It's dedicated to Confucian and Taoist philosophers and the national hero Tran Hung Dao, a prince during the 1200s. Absolutely gorgeous place, and they're really popular for taking photographs as well. The Hoan Kiem Lake is connected with turtles, not just because of the golden turtle god in the legend, but also because of a species of soft-shell turtles that used to live in this lake. Unfortunately, they are extinct now, but you can still see a stuffed turtle of that species inside the Jade Mountain Temple. I'm not sure why so many people took selfies with the turtles, but in a way it's almost fitting. These turtles are now extinct, but they remain here stuffed. And those people will also be extinct at some day, and maybe the selfies will be what remains of them. Many people recommend that you watch a water puppet show if you visit Hanoi. This is an art form that dates back to the 11th century, and it was performed in the villages in the Red River Delta. Farmers back in the day used to entertain other villages with this type of puppet show when the rice fields would flood. The themes of the stories are rural and concern folklore and day-to-day life in Vietnam. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to understand a single word, but they say that the experience is all about the music and the puppets either way. Originally, these water puppet shows would be played out in the flooded rice fields themselves. They'd build a pagoda out in the fields and the puppeteers would hide behind it. The water was used to hide how the puppets were moved, and it also gave the show a gorgeous glittering effect. Is that a human centipede? This is weird. There's a lot of French influences in Vietnam. France attacked the city of Da Nang in 1858 and continued to conquer large areas of the country. By 1887, they formed French Indochina, which consisted of Laos, Cambodia, and large parts of Vietnam. Vietnam as we know it today has been a unified country since 1976, but a lot of French influences still remain. I'm gonna dedicate a whole video to Vietnamese cuisine. That's an area where the French definitely left their mark. But there's also a lot of French influence on the language, the fashion, and maybe most notably on the architecture. If a place has a big statue and a whole square dedicated to Lenin, I guess you can safely say that there are some communist sympathies still remaining. Ho Chi Minh was the revolutionary leader and president of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. He died in 1969, and this mausoleum was built between 1973 and 1975. The mausoleum is open to the public, and inside you can see the fully preserved body of Ho Chi Minh. It's a bit creepy, but very interesting as well. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to film inside, so I hope you're gonna be satisfied with some shots of the mausoleum from the outside. Hanoi is a great place to visit. It's really much more pleasant and nice than a city of 8 million has any right to be. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video about my first impressions of Hanoi. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day. Now I'm off to more adventures in Vietnam, but you can check out this video in the meantime. It should be here somewhere. I'm looking at it, I think.